Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm actually here to wrap up the last books I read for the last half of December of 2022. So I actually went back and forth about doing this video for quite a while. My December was very crappy. I had a terrible reading month, which I think I talked about in the video I did for the books that I read for the first half of December. I can link the wrap up to that in here, which in that one I talked about the first 15 books I had read of the month. I read 39 books for the month of December, which was actually my least amount of reading I did for the entire year for any specific month. And in this month, I had so many 2 stars. It was just a terrible reading month. I was just in this weird slump, kind of, or all these books weren't working for me. I'd pick up new releases I was really excited for. I'd give them 2 stars. So I originally planned to do an entire vlog of December releases and anticipating them. But so far I've given most of them 2 stars. So that got scratched. I would pick up books that I thought were going to be great, that people had been hyping up, pick those ones up. Didn't like those either, had a lot of issues. So yeah. So I read another 2-star book last night and I'm seriously starting to wonder, do I even like reading? How is this month going? This month is not going great. Yeah, I wasn't super excited to talk about any of the books or kind of go into them again. I was just kind of over December, over 2022 and ready to move on to the new year. Just the last little bit of December, the last few days and the last week, I was already making videos and doing my favorites and wrapping up the year and kind of looking forward to the new year. I was doing my January TBR and new releases for 2023 and the new year booktuber tag. I was doing all of these other new year videos so I was just kind of over December and ready to just move on past it. But I decided, you know what, why not? I'll do a super quick and short kind of wrap up because I do want to talk about these books, some of them I guess, and kind of just move on from them and leave them in the past. I feel wrap ups in general, it doesn't really matter which month or day that you watch them. Obviously this is going to be coming very late, mid-January. It's fine, it's whatever, because most of these books, I mean, you can pick them up whenever you want, right? You can read most of these books whenever. Maybe a couple of them are kind of wintry, but they're not super Christmassy. There's nothing you're going to be missing out that I didn't give you my review at the end of December, and you're getting this in January. I was just talking about books. So those are my thoughts. I'm going to try to keep these very short because like I said, I don't really want to go into depth with a lot of these. I'm kind of just over them really. But if you do want to see more of my thoughts and my full reviews on any of these books or any book that I read, I do review every book that I read, and you can get to that from my Goodreads, which is linked in the description of all of my videos. So first up is The Arrangement by Mary Baylog. This is the second book in her Survivors Club series. This one I actually ended up giving it 3 stars. I had read the first book in the series at the first half that was wrapped up in my first half of December. That one I actually enjoyed more. That one I had given it 4 stars, but The Arrangement I gave it 3 stars, which this whole series kind of follows these 7 characters, 6 men and 1 woman, I believe, that they're all kind of survivors of war, traumas, things like that. They formed kind of this Survivors Club. They meet up annually, and so it's kind of all of their stories. So in this book, the hero is actually blind and then is a marriage of convenience romance. It's one of the heroes of Viscount. He was actually wounded during battle, and that's when he became blind. And now all the women in his family, his mother, his sister, his grandmother, they're all trying to play matchmaker and set him up. So he's I need to get away from this. So he leaves town and heads to his country estate. So he's in this very remote little country village, and that's where he meets the heroine, who actually remembers him and knows him from when he was there in the past. And the whole town is just super excited that the Viscount is there. So around the same time that the hero shows up, the heroine finds herself in some trouble because she ends up actually getting kicked out by her guardian from her house. And so she needs a place to stay and needs a quick solution. So the hero is actually the one who offers the perfect solution, which is that they should get married to one another. So the beginning and setup of this one I did around the 50% mark though is where it lost me. Like I said, it was okay. It just wasn't my favorite, so I gave it 3 stars. Next up is Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It had been on my TBR for a couple of months after some friends had loved it, specifically Caitlin from the Love Library. And I know she talked about it first, is who I heard it from. So this one is a contemporary. It is friends to lovers. It is age gap. It is fake dating. It has a single dad hero, and the heroine is actually a comedian. So the heroine in this one, she's a stand-up comedian. She is very loud and proud. I really enjoyed the author's dedication at the beginning of the story, talking about loud and proud. So the heroine's been doing stand-up for a while, and she's actually at this bar or club to get a spot for later in the night when she sees the hero there with a bunch of little girls, which they're all 7. He's there with his daughter and her friends for a birthday party. So she goes over to them and she's like, dude, why do you have a group of schoolgirls here in the middle of the day at a bar? What's going on? So she kind of gives him a hard time. The heroine ends up jumping in right away. She realizes that the girls are all deaf, and so she starts speaking to them with ASL right away and doing sign language, and that was so cute to see. So the hero is kind of definitely very smitten with her from the start, and then from there some events happen, and then he actually ends up becoming her manager, and he is a former comic himself. So the story is told through flashbacks of when they had first met, like when his daughter was having that little birthday party and he became her manager. And then now we're like 3 years in the present as well. So the heroine in the present day is invited to join this like all female comedian group on tour, and they want her to like fake date to help promote and like for publicity. They actually suggest that she fake date the hero because he is like a former comic and all of that. This one, I really loved the friends of lovers kind of fake dating setup. I really enjoyed the beginning of the story. It really pulled me in. I liked seeing the heroine's connection with the hero's daughter and how she plays a role in the story as well. I do think, though, this one started to drag for me kind of in the middle. I didn't really love it. I also wasn't really able to read this book as quickly as I usually do. So with like the holidays and like family life and all of that going on, like I didn't really have a lot of time to spend with the book, which can kind of take me out of books sometimes. Like if I don't read them and finish them like in a day or two, like it kind of just feels kind of like lackluster to me. So I think that definitely played a part in my ratings and feelings for this book, which jumping around with like the flashbacks and the present day kind of pulled me out of the story a lot too. I will say though that the ending with the hero and like his declarations, like I just loved it so much and it brought me back around. Yeah, 4 stars for this one for me. Next, I read Well Traveled by Jen DeLuca. This is the 4th book in her Well Met series, so I've had some kind of mixed feelings with the series. The first book I had liked, the second book I did not like, the third book I loved, and then this 4th book I was curious to see where it would fall. So sadly, this one I did not enjoy. I gave it 2.5 stars. The 3rd book is definitely still my favorite in the series. This one was very slow, and not even like slow burn romance slow, just like slow. Like the story was so slow. It was like 55% into the story before we're even seeing the hero and heroine like start to like one another or have feelings for one another, which we even have a moment here with the hero and he's like telling the heroine like, yeah, I've been interested in you and I can't believe like you haven't seen it. And I was like right along with her of being surprised and like, girl, I didn't see this coming either. So this one definitely felt like the heroine's story. She's actually the cousin of the hero from book 3. And the story starts, the heroine is a high-powered attorney and she is from a family of like overachievers. And so when she doesn't get picked for like partner at her firm, she actually ends up quitting her job. And so then she's kind of like, oh my God, like what am I going to do with my life? What did I just do? And so her cousin is the one who talks her into like, hey, maybe you should join like the Renaissance Fair for the summer and kind of just like get away from our family, get away from your life and like take a break and see what happens. It ends up going from there, and that's how she meets the hero because he is actually part of the band who plays at like the Renaissance Fair. So this one I definitely felt like it was more centered around the heroine's personal growth. Definitely felt more like women's fiction-y because of that. So yeah, I just felt the romance was lackluster and I gave it 2.5 stars. So next, after some of those like blah books, I ended up picking up For Lucy by Jewel E. Ann because I knew so many friends love this book, and so I was really hoping to enjoy it, which sadly I did not. This is actually probably one of my least favorite books of the entire year. I gave it 2 stars. So if you love this book, I'm really glad. I personally did not like this book. I hated it. Yeah. So this one, I actually didn't know too much about it before going in. I only knew that like friends were saying it was really emotional and all of these things. So I just jumped in because I'm like, let's go, like whatever. I didn't even know it was like second chance between a divorced couple until I read the cover of the book and like started reading it. When I jumped into this one, I hadn't seen anybody really talk about the content warnings for this book. Like I said, I didn't even know what it was about at all. So there are definitely a lot of content warning. I personally didn't need them, but I know plenty of people who would need them. So if you want to know that, they are in my Goodreads review. So this one should be a setup of everything I love, like second chance, divorced couple, like getting back together, very emotional. Like that sounds like so many books that I actually do love. Like Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan was one of my favorite books of the year. So this one definitely had like all the tropes and the setup for a book that I could love, but like the execution of the story and the characters is what totally lost me. So in this one, I didn't actually realize until I was reading it and I was halfway through the story that we were only getting the hero's POV. Like I felt very distant from the heroine in this one. And like that is when I realized, wait a minute, like we're never seeing her POV. So I started to realize like why I was feeling so distant from her. I also wasn't a fan of how the beginning chapters would always end. Like they kept reminding us over and over that their marriage broke apart, which like we know they're divorced. I get it. But like every chapter would end with like, he's doing this for Lucy. Like he's only making these choices for Lucy. He has to protect Lucy. Like he's keeping it a secret for Lucy. And I was like, dude, tell me what it is already because I'm tired of all this like edging. Like tell me what happened. So definitely a lot of repetitiveness with their marriage breaking up. And like we do finally find out about halfway into the story why their marriage broke apart, but it took until halfway through the story. And so then when we do find out, I just felt very conflicted about the hero's choices and like decisions and the things that he did for that. Basically in this one, the hero and the heroine, when they were married, they had 2 children, which now they only have 1, their daughter Lucy. So this does deal with the death of a child, which obviously is tragic. I've had friends deal with similar things in the past happening to their children and like splitting up and all of that because of it. Like that's definitely a traumatic situation, but it was the fact of what the hero did and like his choices after the fact, which like really irked me. So I'm definitely going to go into spoilers for this one, which usually I don't do for my reviews, but like for this one, I feel like to talk about it, I need to talk about the spoilers because that's where my 2 stars came in. If you want to skip through this, totally fine, totally get it. But if not, I'm going to put the little spoilers thing here, and then once it's done and gone, then spoilers are over. So spoilers starting now. In this one, the hero and the heroine, they had 2 kids. They were happily married. Everything was great. At one time, their daughter, who was like a preteen at the time, Lucy, she was in charge of looking after her little brother. So when he was in Lucy's charge, Lucy like got distracted. She was doing other things around in the house, and her brother had walked out to the pool and drowned. So the hero / the father, he shows up, and so when he saw this go down, he actually decided to take the blame and told Lucy to not tell her mom what really happened, say that he was in charge of watching the baby and like not her, so that she wouldn't get any of the blame because he wanted to protect Lucy at all costs. So of course, when the wife comes home and finds out that they lost their child, she is devastated. Obviously, like this is a tragic event, but like the hero lying to her and taking the blame and saying that he was the one who was supposed to be watching and like got distracted and went to do something in the garage and like kind of took the blame for the whole situation. Like I did not like that at all. How that entire thing went down, the taking the blame, the lying for years to your ex-wife now, having your daughter lie for you too, like your daughter's in therapy and she's wanting to talk about like what really happened and he's making her like push it down and like repress it and like pretend he was the one to blame. Like as a parent, I would never have my child lie like that. So I don't know, that just like felt so strange and so weird to me. I know it was supposed to have like this emotional pull. Like I felt nothing when this happened for these characters except for being like super pissed off. Daughter has things she needs to work through, like from what happened. Like she was 12 or 13 when this happened. Like obviously she didn't shove him in the pool, but like she was in charge at the time. And like I feel like some therapy and some help that she could work through some of this, but like having her lie is not allowing her to like talk about what actually happened. Like I was just not rooting for this couple to get back together at all, which is definitely not a good sign for a second chance romance. So I actually have like a very long rant on Goodreads on my review, which I'm going to just talk about something here from that because I had quoted it in here. So towards the end of the book, the hero is talking to his ex-wife who was actually engaged the entire book to somebody else. Like up until the last 2 chapters of the book, she is like engaged and getting ready to marry somebody else, which is like a whole other topic. But anyways, but back to the quote. So the hero talks to the ex-wife and he's telling her about their unbreakable bond, their unbreakable trust. Trust? Trust? Like, what trust? This made me laugh out loud so much because I was like, dude, where is this trust? Your marriage and relationship broke up due in part to a lie. Like also obviously the trauma and all that happened with their child, but like you lied to her, you're still lying to her, you're having your child lie to her. Like, where is this trust? You didn't trust her enough to handle the truth at the time, like you lied to her for years. Ugh. So yeah, needless to say, this is getting me like worked up right now too, but this couple definitely needed a lot more time to work through all of this shit they had going on. The last 2 chapters of them finally getting together was definitely not enough. Like I cannot with this book. Like, no. Which, if you wanted content warning for this book, there is death of a child, grief, loss, miscarriage, which is an entire separate incident than the death of the child. There is a love triangle, cheating situation going on. The hero and the heroine, they cheat together on somebody else. Yeah, those were my thoughts on that book and why I'm giving it 2 stars. I do have a special edition of this book on my shelves that I got from like a book box. It's definitely going to be going bye-bye because I do not like this book at all. Which, that said, I have read a book by Julie Ann in the past, and that book I had given 5 stars, which I think was Look the Part. I really enjoyed that one. So I know this author like can work for me. This book just did not hit right at all. And yeah, I'm just ready to move on from it. Next up, I read Captured by Beverly Jenkins. This is the 3rd book in her LeVec family series, and this one I gave 3.5 stars. And this one, the hero is a pirate, or a privateer as he prefers to be called, and he has been targeting slave ships and taking them over, and so he takes over this one ship, and that's where he finds the heroine who is locked on board as a slave. So they end up falling for one another on the high seas together on the way to his private island. And after they fall for one another on his private island, they actually both end up heading back to Savannah together, which is where she is from. And she actually has 2 children there as well, which he wants to help her children and her gain their freedom. This one was okay. Of course, I always love the history and tidbits that Beverly Jenkins puts into her books. This wasn't my favorite in the series, so that's why I gave it 3.5 stars. The first book in the series, though, Through the Storm, that is my favorite of the series. Next up, I read The Frat Boy by Nikki Sloan. This is the 4th book in her Nashville Neighborhood series, which I adore this entire series, and this book was definitely a good one. I gave it 4.5 stars. This book was just like everything delicious and everything fun that I needed after having like quite a few slumpy reads. This one starts off with the hero and the heroine. They're in college and they are like Greek house rivals. They end up getting into a little like tiff during like a little Greek house tournament. And so they end up both getting kicked out and needing a place to go. And so they end up both running into one another at this house and this interview that they're at to kind of be part of an adult film industry. When they get there to live in this house, they actually have to do this audition to be a part of it. And so they have to film an adult film together. And so it has that like hate to love banter and vibe going on, which is so much fun. They both hate one another, but they have like all the feels when they have to film these scenes together. I just loved seeing them explore and experiment and kind of define their own relationship dynamic. Obviously, the steam in here was amazing. We get MF scenes, we get FF scenes, we get FFM scenes, we get MFM scenes, and then we get some MFFM scenes as well. But of course, it's more than just those scenes as well. I really enjoyed the plot and like the characters in this one and them opening up to one another. Some of the neighborhood drama and like the college drama that comes up towards the end of the book, I could have done without, which is why I dropped it down to 4.5 stars. But otherwise, this was a great time, which it actually had me jumping into another little novella from Nikki Sloan, which is It Takes Two. This is the prequel novella for her Blindfold Club series. This book is actually about the couple of who the characters from the Frat Boy end up going to live with and work with. That couple from that book, this is actually their starting point. So this one jumps right into it. The heroine is actually on her way to go do like an adult film shooting, and when she gets there, she finds out that she's actually going to be having to work with 2 male coworkers instead of just one. Jumps right into it with that MFM scene, and then from there, it is her and one of those guys end up having a relationship from there. Gave this one 3 stars. Next is Bad Boys Break Hearts by Michaela Smelter. I think I always get her name wrong, but that's what I'm going with today. This is the first book in her Boys series. I give this one 3.5/4 stars. It was a fun time. This one I grabbed the audio of. It is a college setting. The heroine has just moved to a new college, and she actually ends up running into the hero who she knew when she was a child growing up. But she actually starts dating his best friend and roommate instead, and so it kind of forms this like animosity between them. This one is like slightly sports romance. I definitely wanted more sports from this. The hero in this, he is the pitcher for like their college baseball team. Hero and the heroine, they haven't seen one another for years. Like it's been 10 years since they've seen one another. But hero definitely feels territorial over her and like can't stand that she's dating his roommate. This one's super angsty with her dating the roommate for like half of the book, which her and his roommate are kind of just like friends and trying to figure out if they mean anything more. So it's not really like a serious relationship. So when they do end up splitting up, the hero invites the heroine to go back with him to his family home for Thanksgiving. So the relationship and romance part of this one was definitely slow, and once we do get to that part of their relationship, I wasn't as invested as kind of that like, are they, aren't they, is he going to make a move, is she going to stay with the roommate, like that kind of angst I really enjoyed more. This one is fun, and I definitely want to check out more of the series, probably on audio as well, and yeah, so I gave it 3.5/4 stars. Next, I finished out the Wreckage series from Catherine Cowles, so I read the 4th book in the series, which is Refuge. I gave this one 3.5/4 stars. This one, the hero is an artist, and he ends up moving from New York to this island, which is where the whole series takes place. Island in the Pacific Northwest, and the heroine is actually the caretaker of the estate and like the land and island that he ends up purchasing. So the heroine has had a lot of trauma in her past, and so that is why she's kind of isolated herself on this island, which we find out more of that as the story progresses. Hero is kind of looking for a refuge as well, because back in New York, he actually had a serial killer who was using his paintings and art as inspiration for like recreating the crime scenes from some of his work. These two definitely bond through all of the trauma that they have going on, and like I said, I did like it. Wasn't my favorite in the series, but it's definitely solid, so 3.5/4 stars. The last one in the Wreck series is Beneath the Wreckage by Catherine Cowles, and I gave this one 3.5/4 stars as well. This one, the heroine is back to the island after having been gone for 10 years. Her best friend actually went missing and was presumed murdered there, and so she hasn't been back since. And now she's back, and she wants to reopen the resort of where they had stayed, and she had great memories growing up and kind of looking to her missing friend as well. So she ends up meeting the hero, who is actually the construction guy who gets hired on for the remodel part of the reopening. And the hero, we have seen him a lot in the previous books in the series, and kind of the healing that he's still going through because of events that happened in the previous book. I did like seeing how much family means a lot to both the hero and heroine in this one. The hero is really close to his parents, as well as his brother, who is the hero from book 1 in the series, and then his sister-in-law. And the heroine is really close with her uncles who actually raised her. There were just some fun times in this one. There was a cute dog. The heroine has a dog who follows them around on a lot of adventures. They go book shopping together. The hero and the heroine, they kind of reminisce about childhood favorite books, which was fun to see. The Catherine towels. Of course, we have that classic romantic suspense moments and kidnapping happening at the end of the book. Definitely a solid series. I loved, I think the third book the most was my favorite. I gave that one 5 stars. Everything else was pretty solid. I really love the watercolor covers on this series. Like her covers are always just so pretty. Next, I read The Bride's Necklace by Kat Martin. This is the first book in the Necklace trilogy. This was actually the book club pick for the Rake Appreciation Society. This one I ended up giving 2 stars to. This was actually my first time reading Kat Martin, which I went on to read another book from her later in the month, which we'll get to in a bit. But this one I ended up giving 2 stars to. I really didn't enjoy it. This is one of her later published historicals. Like it was written, I think, in the 2000s. And so I had heard from other people that they really love her earlier work. And so I did get to one of those as well, which I will get to shortly. Premise for this one was super intriguing. It jumps right into it with the heroine waking up in the middle of the night and seeing her sister being almost assaulted by their stepfather. Ends up attacking him and then grabs her sister in all the commotion. They take his prized possession, which is this like diamond and pearl necklace, and then they end up fleeing, and so the sisters take off together. Both of the sisters, they start working in the hero, which is the Earl's home, and they pose as like housekeepers. In this one, the hero actually wants a heroine for his mistress at first. She says no, and then later on she comes back to him wanting him as well. So she ends up confiding in him what kind of happened to her and her sister and how they fled and took the necklace and all of that. Doesn't tell him who they are though, and like that their stepfather is actually a baron, and so they're like a peer's daughters. So then her and the hero end up sleeping together, and after the fact is when he learns who she is. He ends up offering a marriage right away because of like her being a peer's daughter, and so like now he has to be like respectable and marry her. This one was just very blah to me. The story never pulled me in. I wasn't rooting for the characters. There was so much going on with the plot that didn't help as well. There's a murder mystery. There's some like undercover action happening. There's a missing person, and then an entire secondary romance for the heroine's sister as well. The hero in this one was just not it. Did not care for him. In the beginning, he actually wants to bed the heroine's sister. Well, he spends time with them both when they're housekeepers in his house, and he realizes he'd rather bed the heroine instead. There's a lot of like icky guys and cringe moments in general regarding the heroine's sister in this book. So yeah, definitely did not enjoy. Not going to continue on in this series. Gave it 2 stars. Next, I read Spiked Hot Chocolate by Rilsey Adams. This is a holiday novella, and I gave it 3 stars. So this one, the heroine has recently got out of a 7-year relationship right around Thanksgiving, and so now it is holidays and it's Christmas time. And then the hero is a tattoo shop owner, single dad who co-parents his 4-year-old daughter with his ex. So the hero was supposed to have his daughter over the holidays, but his ex is actually like, hey, I'm actually getting remarried and we're eloping. Like, can we take her on our vacation? And he's like, obviously, like, yeah, of course. But now he has like no Christmas plans for himself. So the hero and the heroine find themselves alone for the holidays, and they're both at the same restaurant, and they actually get asked to share a table because the restaurant's like, hey, this other guest and like family with their child, they're trying to do something. Like, can you guys share a table to help them out? So it goes from there with them kind of connecting and hanging out, and then they make plans to spend Christmas Eve and Christmas Day together as well. This was just short and sweet. I wanted a little bit more from the connection and the chemistry for the couple. Not my favorite from this author, but it was definitely a very solid read. Next, I read Little Dove by Layla Frost, and I ended up giving this one 2 stars and did not have a great time with it. So this one I went in expecting age gap, captive, kind of mafia situation. But while it does have all of that set up, except for like the hero is more like billionaire, businessman instead of like mafia vibes, like all the tropes were there, but this just didn't work for me. So the heroine's father is a professional boxer who ends up throwing a fight at the beginning of the story. He has done some other like questionable things in the past with like cheating and gambling debts and all of that. And so the hero shows up to kind of reclaim these debts from him. But he ends up killing the heroine's father instead, and so when he sees the heroine there, he ends up taking her captive with him. He takes the heroine with him as she is only 17, but he is like super obsessed with her from the start and obsessed with her the entire year until she turns 18. The hero in this one is a successful businessman, and he owns like multiple high-end Las Vegas hotels. So in this one, I listened to the audio, and the audio narration for the heroine as well as the writing just did nothing for me and really didn't help the heroine's character out. The heroine is obviously young, but the writing did like no favors in making her sound more mature. Her character just came off very immature, and like their relationship dynamic just didn't work for me. There is some daddy kink in here, which I don't mind at all in reads, but for this one with the heroine seeming like so immature, like it just came off kind of cringy and icky. The hero in this one, he is like mid-30s, and the heroine is 17 for the first 30% of the story, and then later on, of course, she turns 18. I just never really came to care for their characters, and the plot just did nothing for me either. So yeah, I gave this one 2 stars. Next up, I read Hold by Claire Kent, and this is the first book in her Hold series. I gave this one 3.5/4 stars. I've been obsessed with Claire Kent lately. I love her post-apocalyptic romance series, which is the Kindled series, which I've talked about so many times here on my channel. So I definitely want to read more of her series, and this one is like a sci-fi, space, kind of futuristic setting. So this series, they all kind of take place on these different planets, and all the planets are different. And so in this one, it's actually a prison planet. In this one, the heroine is convicted of a minor crime, and so she is actually sent to a prison planet to serve her time. The entire planet that she is sent to is covered with this like volatile, poisonous ocean, and beneath that is the prison. So basically, like if people ever escape the prison and get out, they're going to be in this poisonous ocean and die. And so the prison has definitely kind of become its own thing where like everything violent and anything can go, and like people just kind of have to survive and find resources as they can. So the heroine, before she goes to the prison planet, she's actually given advice from someone, and they basically tell her like, if you want to survive there, you need to find the strongest man and do whatever it takes to get him to protect you. So right away she ends up meeting the hero there, who he's kind of this mysterious loner who's just used like his strength and his smarts to kind of form his own little territory. She ends up joining up with him pretty quickly and like gives her a body to him in a form of payment of his protection. This was on the shorter side. It's about 200 pages and it just moves really fast. It kept me entertained. There was that forced proximity because they're together like in this prison cell the whole time. Yeah, it was a great time, and I have gone on to continue the series since, but that's in my January wrap up. Next I read Set the Record Straight by Hannah Bonham Young. This was a holiday sapphic contemporary romance novella. This one has autism and neurodivergent rep, as well as being friends to lovers and a fake dating. I ended up giving this one 3 stars and had kind of a hard time with it. My first read from this author, and I just had a hard time with the writing and kind of getting into it. Something about the writing just didn't work for me, and it kept like just pulling me out of the story. This one, the 2 heroines are childhood friends who both end up needing a fake date for like different situations. One of them is actually a photographer, and she ends up needing a fake date for like this art gallery opening, because with her new coworkers and everything, she ended up like slipping up and telling them like, oh yeah, I'll be there, and like I'll be there with my girlfriend, which she has only ever been into guys in the past, and she is not in a relationship at the moment. And then the other heroine is a teacher who recently got out of an engagement after being cheated on. She has always crushed on the other heroine, and she actually needs a date for her like work Christmas party, which her ex-fiance and her new partner, who they actually cheated on her, are the ones hosting it. It's really short. It's like 130 pages. Like I said, I had a hard time getting pulled into the story, had a hard time with the writing in general, and also being able to like differentiate between the 2 heroines. I felt like they just kind of blended as one, and I really just didn't get any of that chemistry from them that I would expect from like longtime friends turned lovers. This one was just more on the insta love vibes for me, and the fake dating ended a little too quickly. But like I said, I know friends who loved this one, so maybe it was just me and my sucky month of reading. I did like though that this one takes place in Canada. Next up, I read Midnight by Beverly Jenkins. I gave this one 4 stars. This was actually the last Beverly Jenkins read that I needed to read to be caught up on her entire historical romance backlist, which finally did it. Read them all. Love her books so much. She's definitely a favorite. Most of her historical romances take place around the Civil War or after that, and so this one was actually kind of unique because it takes place during the Revolutionary War. This one, the heroine lives with her father in Boston. Her father is a loyalist, but the heroine is actually a spy for the rebels, and she is actually known as Lady Midnight. But then the hero, he actually ends up coming back to Boston in this one, and he runs into the heroine and her father, which his father and her father were actually friends growing up but became enemies, and so the hero kind of suspects her father was involved in his father's death. So the hero's father worked secretly for the rebels, and then the hero ends up taking up that cause as well. And so he ends up having to kind of work with this Lady Midnight, which he doesn't realize is the heroine at first. I just love seeing the friendship in this one and kind of that development of their relationship. When the heroine's father ends up kicking her out of his house, the hero actually offers up like, hey, we should get married then. So I really liked seeing the development of that relationship, and then just kind of the way that the hero spoils the heroine was just so nice to see in a classic Beverly Jenkins style. So yeah, super strong heroine. Loved all the history and tidbits that Beverly Jenkins writes in her stories. Beverly's writing is the one who can sell me on like spy and espionage type stories. Hers do work for me. Yeah, I just really liked it. Really liked the time frame for the story, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read My Present This Year by Sierra Simone. This was just like a little freebie, super duper short little novella. Gave this one like 3.5 stars. This one is inspired by the infamous like 2009 Folgers commercial that had some like incest style vibes, but of course she took it and ran with it a different way and made them into step siblings. Like this one was just filled with lots of coffee, lots of giving in, lots of fun times. Next, I read Red and White, which is also by Sierra Simone, and another little freebie short little novella. I gave this one 3 stars. This was kind of a fairy tale inspired contemporary novella that's like less than 50 pages, and it's inspired by Snow White and Rose Red. So this one is just a quickie FFM winter snowed in novella. The 2 heroines have been kind of hitting it off at college, and they're about to spend their winter break at one of the heroines' family's Montana cabins. So they're just about to finally give in to one another when the hero shows up at the door. They actually end up thinking the hero is like this bear at first because he's like this big burly man, and he just like passes out at their feet. So they end up saving him and getting him warm, which of course lots of clothes are coming off, and then when he wakes up, he is ready to thank them for rescuing him. So it goes from there, and it's just a super short little erotica novella. So I read Faked by Carla Sorensen. This is the second book in her Ward Sisters series. I had read the first book and the fourth book in the series, and I had heard that the middle two books weren't that great, but like I like to finish out a series, so I decided to just get to them. And so I actually ended up giving this one 4 stars. It has a like fake dating setup that I actually really enjoyed. I had heard some not great things about this one before going in, so my expectations were kind of lowered, but I like had a good time with it. This whole series of the Ward Sisters is kind of a spin-off of the Washington Wolves series by Carla Sorensen, which you meet the Ward family in the third book in the series, which is definitely my favorite of that one. And so the 2 sisters of this book and the next book I'm going to talk about, they're twins, and so this is one of their stories. So in this one, the heroine has always been crushing on her twin sister's best friend, and so when she gets the chance to kind of go to this like society event date with him, she jumps in on it. When she shows up, her crush doesn't show up, but his half-brother Bad Boy does instead. So the hero is a semi-pro snowboarder, and the heroine is from this like football legacy family. They actually end up having to fake date to kind of appease one of these investors for his family's possible charity event. Definitely a lot of plot and a lot of situations going on in this one, which I definitely feel like it could have been tightened up a bit, but like for what it was and for the couple, I really enjoyed. So yeah, this was a fun time, gave it 4 stars. Then I read Floyd, which is the third book in the Ward Sisters series, and this is the other twin sisters book, and this one I gave 3 stars. This one is a one-night stand turned into an accidental pregnancy. In this one, the heroine is in England for a semester for school, and on her like first night there or something like that, she ends up going to a bar and kind of feeling lonely and missing her family and friends. And so she ends up at a bar and meets the hero there, who his brother actually owns the bar. She doesn't realize that the hero is a British football player, or like soccer for her in America, and so they kind of have a conversation about that and like which one is the real football. And they end up sharing a night together, which of course leads to her getting pregnant. I thought the premise of this one was fine, and the bantery bits in the beginning was pretty fun, but the romance sadly never like picked up for me, and so I wasn't really invested. There is an age gap in this one. She's 22 and he's like in his 30s, and they kind of have to figure out like their future together, because obviously she plans to move back to the States and then he is in England, and so it kind of goes from there. But I'm glad to have that series finished, which like I mentioned, the last book in the series, which is Forbidden, is actually my favorite in the series. So next I read Midnight Rider by Kat Martin, and this was my second Kat Martin read of the month, and this is another one for a book club. This was the book club pick for Historical Hellions in December. This one I had some hopes for, because like the first Kat Martin that I read was like an early 2000s ones, and people had said like just give her a chance, especially her older historicals. So I did and read this one, and sadly it was about the same as the other one for me, and I gave it 2 stars as well. Thinking maybe her writing just isn't for me. I'm not having a great time with Kat Martin. I know that people have mentioned that Night Secrets is really good, so I'll probably give her one more chance, and then after that we'll see. This one has kind of a Western historical romance setting. It does deal with like the history of California and things like that, which was interesting. Hero ends up kidnapping the heroine because her family stole lands from him and his family, and the raid actually led to his brother's death as well, and so he kind of blames her and her family for that and kidnaps her. Which later on he does end up taking her back to her uncle who she lives with, and then it kind of goes from there. It turns into a marriage of convenience situation. This one just really didn't do it for me. I had a really hard time getting into it in the beginning. There's so many like names and things going on, and I was like, who are the main characters? What's happening? Where are we? Yeah, some of the history stuff, super interesting. The romance and the story though, very lacking, and I gave it 2 stars. Next, I read Better Than Fiction by Alexa Martin. This one was really cute. I gave it 3.5/4 stars. This one is actually the romance between a heroine who ends up inheriting a bookshop and she doesn't read, and then the hero ends up being a romance author who has books at her shop. So the heroine's grandmother leaves her bookshop to the heroine, and then the heroine kind of has to pick up the pieces and figure out this like owning a business, figure out the bookshop. There's this book club there of older ladies who read romances and kind of meddle in the heroine's relationship. This one is set in Colorado, and I liked how the hero is like a romance writer and he is a lover of romance. It's only told from the heroine's POV though, so I think it would have been nice to have the hero's POV, but I totally get for the story why we didn't have that. This one was fun and cute though. I like romances that take place kind of around bookshop owners or people who read books or love books or authors as well, and this had kind of all of that going on. The hero and the heroine, they actually end up making a deal together. So the hero wants to go around Colorado and kind of scout out spots and plan for his next book, and so the heroine offers to be his travel guide and kind of tell him the cool spots to check out since she's a local. In exchange, he is like, well, I want to sell you on loving books, so I'm going to give you like a book list of recommendations, and like for every little trip or adventure we take, you have to read a book. The heroine in this one, she does have a complicated relationship with her father, which I kind of liked the exploration of that and kind of her discovery of her relationship with her half-sister. This one was just a great balance of kind of a sweet romance and then some character growth as well. Next, I read Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. This is a newer sapphic holiday contemporary romance. This one I had read The Charm Offensive from the author in the past. I had liked that one a little bit more than this one. I had heard great things about this one, so I wanted to jump into it. In this one, the two heroines actually end up hitting it off and spending the last Christmas Eve together when the story starts. They have like a perfect day, a perfect night, and then the next morning, one of them ends up leaving. And so now we're like a year later, and the heroine who got left, her life is kind of falling apart. Like, she lost her dream job. She's having to work at this coffee shop. Like, she has this complicated relationship with her family. Like, her rent has gone up, just like all these terrible things going on. And then one day at the coffee shop, the owner of the building that the coffee shop is in, so like the landlord, he comes in, and then he ends up getting drunk with the heroine, tells her like he is due to inherit this money, but like to inherit, he has to marry. And she's like, you can just fake marry somebody, like anybody would do it. And he's like, well, would you do it? And so they end up kind of being fake engaged. Then he ends up taking her back to his family's house for the holidays. And then when she gets there is when she meets his sister, who is actually the other heroine that she had that like perfect Christmas Eve with the year before. This one started off really strong for me. I was really pulled in with the story, but somewhere in the middle it kind of lost me and started to drag on. This one I liked some of the characters in here. I didn't love them though, and one of the heroines in particular, I had a harder time with her character and just couldn't really get behind her. Yeah, it was okay, and I gave it 3 stars. And then lastly, to wrap up December, I read Timeless by Devney Perry, which came out at the very end of the month. This is the 5th book, or it's really a novella, part of her Lark Cove series. So in book 4 of the Lark Cove series, which was Tinsel, we get a little like sneak peek setup of the couple of this book, Timeless. So first off, I really loved how the prologue opened up with being from the POV of Charlie, which is the daughter of the couple from the very first book. So she's like all grown up now, and like we possibly might get something from her in the future, which I'm excited for. Basically, Charlie is with her entire family, all of her cousins and aunts and uncles and all of that, and they're all spending time at Lark Cove, and Charlie has just been broken up with, and so she's kind of feeling heartbroken, and her aunt Aubrey is there and kind of talking to her about one of her bad relationships in the past and how she met her now husband. So then we flash back to 9 years previous when Aubrey and Landon first met. So Aubrey's siblings both have books in the Lark Cove series. Her brother Logan, which is Charlie's dad, is the hero of the first book in the series, which is Tattered. And their sister Sophia is the heroine for the book Tinsel. They're all from the Kendrick family, which is like this really wealthy family in New York, which is where Aubrey still lives. So Aubrey is 35 and she's the CEO of her family's multi-billion-dollar company. And she is just very focused on work and doesn't have time really for anything else. And then the hero is the one who's kind of very interested in her and has to pursue her. So the hero is actually a cop, and he met Aubrey when he had to help out her sister with a situation in the previous book in the series, and so that's how they met. And so he is like determined to get into Aubrey's life and win her, and like goes out of his way to call her and text her and like talk to her all the time. So I liked seeing them kind of become friends and him being the pursuer and trying to have to get her mind off of work and kind of interested in him. It was a fun time, and I gave it 4 stars. So for December, I read 39 books, which I ended out the year with 620 books read. This month in particular was definitely a rougher month for me. Lots of 2 and 3-star reads. So it definitely wasn't a great time, but I'm glad to have that behind me now and can focus and move forward on 2023 reads. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books that I just talked about, or maybe what some of your favorite books in December that you read were. I'd love to know. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.